Hey everyone, welcome back to all my listeners. This is my 170th episode of my 10th season. Today is Wednesday, November 29th, 2023. My name is Sonal Patel, and this is the Paint the Medical Picture podcast series. Now, I hope everyone shared their plates and their gratitude this past Thanksgiving and supported some small business owners and gave back in any way they could. Now, let's get into today's episode. It's the last Wednesday of the month, so you know it's my Newsworthy Fraud, Waste, and Abuse highlights for the month of November. And of course, I'm going to be spotlighting some of those from the month's criminal and civil enforcement cases that I find newsworthy. And in my Trusty Tip, I want to go over RPM services, or remote patient monitoring, and how to ensure they are compliant, because they are currently in the spotlight for fraud by the OIG. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and close out and round out today's episode with a remarkable quote on perseverance by David Blaine. This episode is sponsored by Utilization Management University. Let's get into it. Whether you are involved in the business of healthcare or any other business, what do you, your teams, and your management concentrate on the most? Typically, they communicate, problem solve, and make strategic decisions that drive the success of the organization. But how much time is actually spent in making tomorrow better than today? Are they striving for operational excellence? Prevention versus correction is a concept that's been known for years. So why do so many companies not implement the process? Utilization Management University provides a course that proves to be a unique solution to instill change in the mindset of business teams. This course provides the theory and the practical approach. This course will demonstrate how to implement a simple methodology as a solution. This course provides a detailed explanation of each and every step involved in prioritizing your problems and finding the root cause. This course shows how to engage team buy-in. This course readily provides available support for any issues. And the course provides the theory and helps you adapt it to your own individual circumstances. Check out the details at www.utilizationmanagementuniversity.com today and get registered. Utilization Management University, making tomorrow better. So let's get into Newsworthy, the month's fraud, waste, and abuse cases. The month of November saw 43 cases as of the recording of this episode. Early November saw a case involving the owner of an Indian marketing company admitting his role in an $11.5 million healthcare fraud and kickback scheme. Here, the owner of a marketing company located in India admitted his role in conspiracies to commit healthcare fraud and to pay and receive illegal kickbacks. The man pleaded guilty in a New Jersey federal court to information charging him with conspiracy to violate the federal anti-kickback statute, the AKS, and his conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud. According to documents filed in this case and statements made in court, from February 2017 to May 2022, he participated in a kickback and bribery scheme with orthotic brace supply companies and telemedicine companies and testing laboratories, which resulted in the submission of false and fraudulent claims to Medicare. He controlled a marketing company in India through which he and his co-conspirators identified Medicare patients to target for orthotic braces and cancer genetic tests, CGX tests. Employees of the company called patients and pressured them to agree to accept orthotic braces and or CGX tests regardless of medical necessity. He and his company paid kickbacks to a telemedicine company to obtain doctors' orders for the orthotic braces and CGX tests. He then steered those doctors' orders to orthotic brace suppliers and testing laboratories located in the U.S., with which he and his company had additional kickback arrangements. The orthotic brace suppliers and laboratories submitted claims for reimbursement to Medicare, and thereafter sent a portion of those proceeds to he and his company as payment for the doctor's orders generated through their conspiracy. In total, he and the co-conspirators caused a loss to Medicare of more than $11.5 million. The conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud count is punishable by a maximum of 10 years in prison, and the conspiracy to pay illegal kickbacks is punishable by a maximum of 5 years in prison. Both counts are also punishable by a $250,000 fine or twice the gross gain or loss from the offense, whichever is greatest. Sentencing is scheduled for March 2024. Early November also saw a Georgia doctor agreeing to pay $225,000 to resolve allegations for improper billing. Here, the doctor and his practice group have agreed to pay $225,000 to resolve allegations that they violated the False Claims Act by, among other things, billing the government for office visits that were not medically necessary, were not provided as claimed, and were not supported by patient medical records. This settlement resolves allegations that from January 2, 2018 to February 12, 2021, the doctor knowingly submitted false claims to federal healthcare programs for office visits that were not as complex or lengthy as the doctor purported. This is a practice commonly known as upcoding. The government also alleged that she submitted claims of certain office visits to federal healthcare programs as though she had personally provided the service, even though she was traveling out of the country at the time these services were allegedly performed. The settlement also resolves allegations in a lawsuit filed by 2 former employees of hers under the QTAM, or whistleblower provisions, of the False Claims Act. The False Claims Act authorizes private parties to sue for false claims on behalf of the United States and share in the recovery. The claims resolved by this settlement are allegations only, and there has been no determination of liability. Early November also saw a second owner of a California sleep clinic pleading guilty to submitting over $1.5 million in fraudulent claims to Medicare and Medi-Cal for sleep studies. Here, the second owner pleaded guilty to healthcare fraud and aggravated identity theft charges for submitting more than $1.5 million in fraudulent claims to Medicare and Medi-Cal for sleep studies. He co-owned and co-operated the entity, which operated sleep clinics in multiple counties in California. Sleep clinics perform diagnostic sleep studies to identify disorders like sleep apnea and narcolepsy. According to court documents, between August of 2016 and July 2020, he allegedly caused the entity to submit thousands of claims to Medicare and Medi-Cal for sleep studies that were not actually performed on patients. The claims also stated falsely that the patients had been referred for the sleep studies by physicians with whom he had previously worked. This was done because Medicare and Medi-Cal will not pay for a sleep study unless the patient was referred by a physician. He faces a maximum statutory penalty of 10 years in prison for the healthcare fraud conviction and an additional mandatory 2 years in prison for the identity theft conviction. The actual sentence, however, will be determined at the discretion of the court after consideration of any applicable statutory factors and the federal sentencing guidelines, which take into account a number of variables. Now, back in September 2023, his brother pleaded guilty to similar healthcare fraud and aggravated identity theft charges related to other sleep clinics in another California location. Late November saw an attorney general who announced a guilty verdict of physicians who subjected their patients to unnecessary and invasive tests. Here, the doctor and his company were found guilty on charges related to running a kickback scheme that defrauded Medicaid and subjected patients to invasive procedures they did not need. In August 2022, the Office of the Attorney General, the OIG, indicted the doctor, and in late November 2023, he was found guilty of grand larceny in the 3rd degree, healthcare fraud in the 3rd degree, 4 out of 8 counts of falsifying business records in the 1st degree, and 2 counts of violating the social service law statute prohibiting the payment of kickbacks all felony charges. From January 2006 to August 2017, the doctor ran a kickback scheme in which he gave gift cards and cash to 2 physicians in exchange for the physician's referral of patients. In addition, from January 2014 to August 2017, he directed his employees to add additional unordered radiological procedures to orders submitted by referring physicians to increase the amount of money received from Medicaid. He defrauded Medicaid and subjected patients to medically unnecessary and often invasive radiological testing without the direction, consent, or approval of referring physicians responsible for the underlying care of those patients. The additional tests included MRIs of the brain, cervical spine, and lumbar spine, all with contrast, which required subjecting patients to unnecessary and invasive injections. He then directed his staff to submit claims for payment to Medicaid for those medically unnecessary tests. Now, there were many of the other usual suspects as well, from nursing abuses, DME fraud, genetic testing schemes, prescription drug, opioids, and pill mills cases, and even more kickbacks and bribery schemes. But I wanted to pay particular attention to a case involving a chief compliance officer. That's right, deep breath, you heard me right. Mid-November saw a chief compliance officer sentenced for a $50 million Medicare fraud scheme. This Florida man was sentenced to 4 years and 6 months in prison and ordered to pay $21.7 million in restitution for his role in a healthcare fraud and wire fraud conspiracy that resulted in over $50 million in false and fraudulent claims being submitted to Medicare. According to court documents and evidence presented at trial, this man was the chief compliance officer of a pharmacy holding company that fraudulently billed Medicare for dispensing lidocaine and diabetic testing supplies that Medicare beneficiaries did not need nor want. He, along with his co-conspirators, operated a holding company for a number of pharmacies in various states. The pharmacies operated by the holding company secured prescriptions and refills for medically unnecessary prescriptions for lidocaine and diabetic testing supplies in violation of Medicare's rules and regulations, as well as the pharmacy benefit manager's rules and regulations in which the pharmacies had contracts. This evidence presented at trial also showed that he and his co-conspirators took several steps to conceal their scheme, including enrolling their mail-order pharmacies as brick-and-mortar retail pharmacies to evade more rigorous oversight, shipping prescription refills for high-reimbursing medications and supplies without patient consent, concealing the ownership of the holding company and its pharmacies, and transferring patients between these pharmacies without patient consent. Each of these steps was taken to ensure that profitable medications and supplies, like lidocaine and diabetic testing supplies, continued to be billed to Medicare. Now, in June, this chief compliance officer was convicted of conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud and wire fraud. And now it's time for my best practice tips in Trusty Tip. Now, there's a new Consumer Protection Alert that's been issued by the OIG. This is a fraud scheme that they've identified for remote patient monitoring services, RPM services. Now, this scam involves signing up our most vulnerable, right? Those are our Medicare enrollees for remote patient monitoring. Those RPM services, again, they've tried to sign them up, and they did, under false pretenses and false promises. Now, legitimate RPM definitely uses medical devices as appropriate, like scales or glucose monitors or blood pressure cuffs or cardiac rhythm devices, as well as other equipment to remotely monitor for anomalies in patients with chronic medical conditions. This treatment is certainly beneficial for those whose conditions might deteriorate quickly, where monitoring can actually reduce complications and hospitalizations and even reduce death. Now, according to the OIG, these fraudsters have been targeting our Medicare enrollees and then signing them up for monthly billing for remote monitoring services that are neither necessary nor were they ever provided. These scams have been occurring via phone solicitations, clickbait internet ads, and TV advertising from places claiming to be durable medical equipment companies or claiming to be pharmacies involving devices that are not even approved by the FDA. Billing then occurs for setup, patient teaching, and monthly monitoring of data. Most often, the monthly monitoring never even happens, but the enrollee is billed monthly anyway. The Department of Health and Human Services, that's our HHS, has said people should hang up if someone calls offering them a free brace that they will then bill to Medicare. So they should review their explanation of benefits for services not ordered and refuse delivery of devices that were not ordered by their healthcare provider. So take this trusty tip, protect yourself, protect your loved ones. And finally, I focus Season 10's Spark on perseverance. I want this 10th season Spark to be filled with our world's thought leaders, writers, artists, philosophers, everyone who inspires the need for perseverance in all we strive to do. So, in this week's inspiring quote in Spark is from David Blaine. Whether you're shuffling a deck of cards or holding your breath, magic is pretty simple. It comes down to training, practice, and experimentation, followed up by ridiculous pursuit and relentless perseverance. Absolutely true, right? This quote reminds us that we are capable of magic. This quote encourages us to keep learning, keep trying, keep pushing ahead. This quote encourages us to believe in our hard work and our efforts. That plays a part in our magic. It's our relentless perseverance that leads to success. I'm happy David Blaine's spark still burns brightly in all of us today. So that wraps up today's episode. And as always, I appreciate you all diving into today with me. If you want more information from me, please go ahead and follow me on LinkedIn. I'll leave links to everything in the show notes below. Now, as November closes up in just one more day, I hope you guys are looking forward to all that the next month brings. What December brings all of us. Christmas shopping, Hanukkah shopping, Kwanzaa shopping, whatever your holiday is, it's coming, and hopefully with a bow, right? So I hope you keep all of your spirits bright. Wishing you all an amazing and very, very happy week ahead. Thank you all so much for listening on today's episode, and I hope every week with me brings you closer to helping your providers paint a masterpiece. See you next Wednesday.